The clinking of crystal glasses celebrating the new public relations director had just begun to fade when a wheeze escaped my throat like a faulty kettle. I am Sailor Cole, an expert in antique book restoration, someone far more familiar with paper dust and quiet than extravagant gatherings like this. I felt completely out of place among designer suits and practiced smiles. My sister, Sloane, stood on the small podium at the front of the VIP room, her teeth perfectly white under the amber lighting. She leaned into the microphone with that polished PR smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Here we go again," she said, her voice carrying theatrical fatigue. "Sailor, don't make a scene. It's just mushroom soup. There's no crab. Or, do you want to ruin my promotion party?" A ripple of uneasy laughter moved through the room. Sloane believed she had scored with her sharp humor, performing for the crowd as always, basking in their approval. But she didn't notice the man across from me, Magnus Thorne, group chairman, and the very person who had approved her promotion, was staring at my soup bowl in sheer horror. His daughter has a severe shellfish allergy. He knows exactly what anaphylaxis looks like, how an airway can close in moments. Before I could react, Magnus moved. He pulled an EpiPen from his $5,000 suit and rushed toward me with startling speed for a man of 58. To understand how I ended up in this near-death moment, I need to go back. Earlier that evening, this was meant to be an intimate dinner celebrating Sloane's promotion in the VIP room of Etoile, a 3 Michelin-starred restaurant with a 3-month wait list and unlimited credit card requirement. The room glowed with golden light, each detail worthy of a luxury magazine spread. Chandeliers dripped crystals. Walls were lined with dark wood paneling. The air smelled of old money and fresh ambition. I am 26 years old. Despite my youth, I've earned recognition as an antique book conservator. Academics sometimes call me the surgeon for history for my cold precision, logical approach, and deep knowledge of preservation chemistry. I work with objects centuries old, handling them with a meticulousness usually reserved for defusing bombs. My hands have restored manuscripts that survived wars, floods, and fires. My work demands patience, silence, and reverence for fragile beauty. My sister Sloane, by contrast, is 29 and has recently been promoted to Public Relations Director at Thorne Global, one of the country's largest multinational corporations. She presents a glamorous exterior, designer clothes, perfect hair, and a smile she can switch on and off at will. Where I am quiet and cautious, she is loud and impulsive. Where I preserve, she destroys. Our parents, Alistair and Cordelia Cole, both 60 and notoriously vain, sat at the table that evening, beaming over Sloane's new title and basking in the reflected glory. They delight in discussing Sloane's career, her network, and her visibility. At the same time, they belittle my work, calling it dusty or depressing, never recognizing its true value. To them, I am the disappointing daughter who chose books over boardrooms. The tension that eventually led to my poisoning, yes, poisoning, started even before the party began. Earlier that evening, Sloane had been in the restaurant lobby trying to intercept Magnus Thorne. She wanted to show him a media report she had prepared on Thorne Global's latest acquisition, seeking his attention and praise. Instead, Magnus noticed me near the coat check. His interest was genuine. He spent 20 minutes discussing the deacidification process of ancient paper with me, asking detailed questions about pH balance, alkalization treatments, and the differences between European and Asian paper fibers. He shared information about an 18th century letter collection his company had recently acquired and asked if I would consider consulting on its preservation. Throughout that conversation, I observed Sloane. Her jaw tightened, her fingers curled into fists, and rage built behind her eyes. This was meant to be her night, her moment. Yet here I was, the seemingly boring little sister, drawing the attention of the most important person in the room. Sloane's jealousy was both intense and dangerous. She aimed to humiliate me, to make me appear weak, or worse, to make it seem that I was faking my allergy for attention. She assumed that a little crab essence would not be lethal, only mildly irritating, perhaps causing some hives. Her plan was to make me lose face in front of Magnus, our parents, and everyone who mattered. I didn't witness the act directly, but I later reconstructed it from witness accounts. About 30 minutes before the soup course, Sloane excused herself from the table and approached Chef Bastien in the kitchen, a man known for his creative takes on classic French cuisine. With her signature PR smile, she said, "I have a special request. I've heard everyone praising your famous crab fat oil, the one you use in your signature bouillabaisse. It's supposed to be incredible." Chef Bastien, pleased, nodded. His crab fat oil was indeed renowned, slowly rendered from blue crab roe fat, infused with aromatics until it became a rich, amber-colored, intensely flavorful liquid gold. Sloane continued, "On this important day for me, could I experience something special? Could you add just a touch of that crab oil to the truffle mushroom soup? I think the combination would be extraordinary, novel, and unexpected." Chef Bastien was taken aback by the unusual request. Crab and truffle were not a classic combination, yet he was an inventive chef, always open to trying something new for clients who showed real appreciation for his work. He considered it briefly: the umami richness of crab fat, the deep earthiness of truffle, the gentle sweetness of mushrooms. On reflection, it wasn't such a poor idea. It might actually succeed. "For you, Miss Cole, on this special evening," he said with a polite bow, "I will prepare a single bowl using crab oil as an amuse-bouche before the main soup course." "Thank you so much," Sloane replied warmly. "You're truly an artist." What Chef Bastien did not know, what he could not have known, was that there was a hidden motive behind the request. He had no idea that Sloane had a sister with a severe, life-threatening shellfish allergy. He also had no idea that the bowl he was preparing with such care would be turned into a weapon. When the soup was served, it looked exquisite. The waiter, a young man named Andy, carefully set the bowls down on the table. Mine had stunning reddish-brown oil patterns floating on top, catching the candlelight and glowing like molten copper. Sloane leaned toward me, her tone gentle and affectionate. "I asked Chef Bastien to add a bit of smoked chili oil and pine mushroom extract to yours," she said. "I know rich food can feel overwhelming for you sometimes, so I thought this would help. The chili gives warmth without being too heavy. I should have trusted my instincts more. I am naturally cautious. It's a trait that serves me well in my profession. When you work with materials that are 400 years old, you learn to question everything, to test each solution, and to verify every step. But this time I failed to do that. My sister's excitement, the opulent setting, the soft golden lighting, all of it misled my senses. The soup itself was a flawless illusion. The powerful aroma of truffle mushrooms filled the air, deep and consuming. The golden amber hue of the crab oil was indistinguishable from truffle oil, and the mushroom fragrance completely concealed the faint seafood scent I might otherwise have noticed. I had no suspicion at all. I lifted my spoon and took a small bite. The flavor was remarkable, rich, savory, and layered. For about 5 seconds, I believed Sloane had genuinely done something thoughtful for me. Then my throat began to tighten. The reaction was sudden and severe. It felt as though an invisible hand had closed around my windpipe, squeezing with relentless force. My lips started to tingle, then burn, then swell. My tongue thickened inside my mouth, obstructing my breathing. Angry red hives spread rapidly across my skin, blooming over my arms and chest like fire. I tried to stand, but my legs gave way. The room spun violently. I fell from my chair, hitting the soft carpet hard enough to drive the remaining air from my lungs. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't speak. All I could do was claw at my throat, producing harsh, wheezing sounds that barely sounded human. And through all of it, I heard my sister laughing, not nervously, not in shock, but in triumph. "See! See!" Sloane said loudly, her voice echoing through the private dining room. "She's eating mushrooms and pretending she's allergic to crab. This year's Oscar for Best Actress goes to Sailor Cole." Some guests laughed uncertainly. Others looked uneasy, unsure whether this was a dark family joke or something far more serious. "Come on, Sailor," Sloane continued, stepping closer as I writhed on the floor. "You can stop pretending now. You've got everyone's attention. Isn't that what you wanted? To turn my special night into something all about you?" I tried to look at her. I tried to make her understand that this was real, that I was dying. But my vision was narrowing, dark spots flickering at the edges as everything began to fade, and I thought this was how it would end. Killed by my own sister at a dinner party, while everyone watched, thinking it was a joke. But Magnus was already there. Before I even fully hit the floor, he was kneeling beside me, EpiPen in hand. "Move!" he shouted, his voice cutting through the laughter like a blade. "Someone call an ambulance. Now!" "Hold still!" he said calmly, despite the chaos around us. "You're going to be okay. I've got you." He pulled the cap off the EpiPen and pressed it into my thigh, right through my dress. The needle pierced fabric and skin, and I felt the epinephrine rush through me like icy water in my veins. The effect wasn't instant, but it was noticeable. The crushing pressure on my throat eased just enough for me to draw a thin, whistling breath. "Ambulance! Ambulance!" Magnus shouted again, scanning the stunned staff. "Call emergency services immediately, and someone bring me oxygen if it's available." The restaurant manager was already on the phone, stumbling over the address, while a waiter dashed to grab the first aid kit. Magnus looked at me, his expression grim. "Stay with me. The ambulance is coming. You're going to make it." Amid the panic and controlled chaos, I noticed Sloane's expression shift. Her smug satisfaction vanished. She looked at Magnus kneeling beside me, the EpiPen in his hand, and at my lips, swollen to twice their normal size. Slowly, she realized her prank had gone far beyond what she intended. I didn't think," she stammered, taking a step back. My mother rushed over, pale and alarmed. "What happened? What's wrong with her?" "She's having anaphylactic shock," Magnus said sharply. "Someone put shellfish in her food. This isn't a joke or an exaggeration. Without epinephrine, she would be dead in minutes." My father's eyes flicked between the soup bowl and Sloane. Comprehension dawned on his face. "Sloane," he said slowly, "what did you do?" "Nothing," she said quickly. "I just asked for mushroom soup. There wasn't supposed to be any crab in it." Before she could continue denying it, Andy the waiter appeared at her elbow. "Miss Sloane," he said cautiously, "do you want me to clear the table? You asked me to have everything ready." "Not now," Sloane snapped. That's when the epinephrine hit fully. My heart raced, my airways opened, and a fraction of my strength returned. Along with it came total clarity. I grabbed Magnus' wrist with surprising force, locking onto his expensive watch like a vice. He looked down, startled. My throat was still swollen, so I couldn't speak, but I could communicate. I pointed at the soup bowl with my free hand, then made a fist, the universal signal to hold or preserve. Magnus understood instantly. He wasn't a police officer or a lawyer, but he was a billionaire who had built an empire by reading situations and acting decisively. "No one touches that soup!" he roared, authority in every word. "Security, seal this table. This is a crime scene." The restaurant security guards, who had been lingering at the edges of the room, sprang into action, forming a barrier around the table. "Mr. Thorne," Sloane said, forcing a laugh, "isn't this a bit dramatic? It's just a misunderstanding." "Nothing leaves this table," Magnus said coldly like Arctic ice. "Not the dishes, not the soup, not a single napkin. Everything stays exactly where it is until the authorities arrive." My mother grabbed Sloane's arm. "Tell me you didn't do this on purpose," she whispered urgently. "Tell me it was an accident." Sloane opened her mouth to answer, but no sound came out. Her face had gone pale. I lay on the floor, still holding Magnus' wrist, and felt a grim satisfaction despite the pain, the fear, and the struggle to breathe. I had used my last bit of strength to preserve the most critical evidence, the soup that nearly killed me, proof of what my sister had done. That was my first small victory before the edges of darkness began creeping back into my vision. The last thing I remember before the paramedics arrived was Magnus leaning over me, his hand steady on my shoulder, saying, "You're a fighter. Good. You're going to need that." The paramedics worked on me right there in the VIP room, while Magnus issued instructions like a commander directing troops. They administered another dose of epinephrine, connected me to oxygen, and checked my vital signs. My blood pressure was dangerously low, and my oxygen saturation had dropped to the 70s when it should have been in the 90s. "We need to transport her immediately," one paramedic said. "She needs to be in the ER under observation. Anaphylaxis can have a biphasic reaction. She could crash again in a few hours." But before they could move me onto the stretcher, Magnus turned sharply toward Sloane. His face was carved from stone. "You said this was normal mushroom soup?" he asked, his voice quiet but deadly. Sloane's hands trembled as she clasped them together. Yes, she replied, her voice cracking on the word. Of course it was normal mushrooms. The girl always overreacts, someone muttered. It's probably just a panic attack. A panic attack doesn't close your airway, Magnus said flatly. It doesn't require an EpiPen. Stop lying. At that moment, Chef Bastien stormed into the VIP room. He had been in the kitchen when Andy informed him of the medical emergency involving the soup. He had been told that a guest had a shellfish allergy, and the news hit him like a blow. Miss Sloane, he said, face flushed with confusion and distress. The waiter just told me what happened. But I don't understand. You requested the crab fat oil yourself. You asked me to add it to the truffle soup as a special request. You said it would be novel, unexpected. I thought you wanted to try it. A tense hush fell over the banquet room. All eyes turned to Sloane. Andy, the young waiter serving our table that evening, stepped forward quietly. Miss Sloane signaled for me to place that specific bowl in front of Miss Saylor. I remember because you made very clear eye contact with me and pointed to her seat. Complete, suffocating silence followed. I lay on the stretcher, the oxygen mask covering half my face, watching my family's illusions collapse in real time. My father's face had gone gray. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. They stared at Sloane as if seeing her for the first time. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't even negligence. This was a deliberate trap, carefully planned and coldly executed. Tell me they're wrong, my father said hollowly. Tell me you didn't do this on purpose. Sloane's eyes darted around the room, wild and desperate, like a cornered animal searching for a way out. That I just thought she always makes such a big deal about her allergy. I figured if she had just a tiny amount, she'd finally realize she'd been exaggerating all these years. I thought it would only make her a little uncomfortable, maybe some hives. I never intended for it to get this serious. You never meant to almost kill your sister? Magnus asked, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. Is that your defense? It was supposed to be harmless. Sloane's voice rose, becoming shrill. She's always so dramatic about everything. I just wanted her to stop being the center of attention for once. This is my night, my promotion, and she has to make it all about her and her stupid allergy. Shut up, my father said. I'd never heard him speak to Sloane that way before. In our family, Sloane had always been the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. His harsh tone silenced everyone. We need to leave, a paramedic said urgently. Her condition could worsen. She needs to be in a hospital. As they wheeled me toward the door, I looked each family member in the eye. My mother was crying, her perfect makeup smeared. My father looked 10 years older in 10 minutes, and Sloane looked terrified. Good, I thought. Be terrified. The most insidious toxicity doesn't come from obvious violence or slaps. It comes from acts sugar-coated as care. When someone deliberately tests your safety, plays with your life, and calls it a joke, they're not joking. They're showing who they truly are. For 26 years, I had been the quiet, understanding younger sister, the one who accepted being overlooked, underestimated, and dismissed. Keeping the peace was easier than fighting back. But as the ambulance doors closed and the siren began wailing, something inside me shifted. Sloane wasn't just jealous. She was willing to risk my life, genuinely endanger me, just to satisfy her ego, to punish me for being successful, for being interesting to someone who mattered. And my parents, who had always defended her and dismissed my hurt feelings, could no longer deny the truth laid bare before them. A coldness spread through me, unrelated to the anaphylaxis. It was the chill that comes when emotional bonds snap, when you finally stop lying to yourself about the people you love. The paramedic adjusted my oxygen mask. How are you feeling? She asked gently. I couldn't speak. My throat was still swollen, and my vocal cords would take weeks to heal. I raised my hand, signaling okay. I wasn't okay, physically or emotionally, but I was clear-eyed. I was done being the submissive younger sister who silently endured injuries. I would handle this like a moldy book, with ruthless precision, removing every harmful trace until only clean paper remained. Sloane had tried to destroy me. Instead, she had freed me. Now I would show her what happens when someone careful, controlled, and quiet is pushed too far. It's not an explosion, it's precision. The chaos spilled from the restaurant lobby onto the sidewalk as the ambulance was being prepped. Magnus stood near the rear, phone in hand, finger hovering over his attorney's number, who had connections to the district attorney. "I'm calling the police," he announced. Sloane followed, pushing past security, desperate to control the story. Her heels clicked frantically on the pavement. "This is attempted murder, or at least aggravated assault. Miss Cole will be arrested tonight." Sloane went pale. The last color drained from her cheeks. "No," she whispered. "No, please, Mr. Thorne. It was a mistake. I didn't mean." "You admitted to intentionally contaminating your sister's food with a substance you knew she was severely allergic to," Magnus said flatly. "You did it at a corporate event, using company resources, while acting as Thorne Global's newly appointed PR director. If I contact the police right now, you'll be in custody before midnight. Your career will end before it truly starts. And given how calculated this was, you're facing serious prison time." My mother clutched Sloane's arm, her face collapsing. "Oh, my sweet girl. What have you done? What have you done?" My father remained motionless, his mind clearly racing through the social and professional consequences of having a daughter arrested for attempted murder at a Michelin-starred restaurant. The scandal would be massive, impossible to contain. But I noticed something else unfolding. I saw Magnus' grip tighten around his phone. I noticed the other diners lingering nearby, phones in hand, likely already messaging friends about the scene. I saw the restaurant manager wringing his hands, visibly panicked over the publicity disaster this would bring. And I recognized my opening. Even as I lay on the stretcher, my throat still swollen and my voice reduced to a rough rasp, I lifted my hand. I pulled the oxygen mask away from my face. "Ma'am, please keep that on," the paramedic urged, trying to put it back. "You need oxygen." I gently but firmly pushed her hand aside. "Wait," I managed a rasp. The single word felt like swallowing shards of glass. Magnus turned toward me, startled. The room fell silent as everyone strained to hear. I met Magnus' gaze directly, my eyes steady despite what my body had just endured. "Don't call the police." "Yet," I said, each word a strain. The paramedic glanced anxiously at my monitors. "Arresting the PR director will cause Thorne Global's stock to crash. I don't want to damage your assets." I paused for a ragged breath. "My lawyer will handle this. Tomorrow." Relief washed over my family's faces, almost absurd in its intensity. My mother sobbed openly. "Oh, Sailor. Thank you. Thank you. You're such a good girl. Such a good sister." My father's shoulders slumped. "We'll sort this out as a family. We'll sit down tomorrow and discuss everything calmly." Sloane, however, looked at me with a mix of relief and disdain. I understood her expression perfectly. She thought I was weak. She assumed I was too afraid to press charges. She believed family loyalty would prevail. "Sailor," she said, stepping closer to the ambulance, her voice adopting that sugary, manipulative tone she uses when she wants something. "I know you're upset, and you have every right to be. But we're sisters. We're family. We can work through this. Maybe therapy. Family counseling." I raised my hand to stop her. When I spoke again, my voice was barely above a whisper, but unmistakably clear. "My lawyer will contact you with the terms." "Terms?" Sloane blinked, confused. "For the settlement," I clarified, suppressing a cough. "You're going to pay for what you did? Every cent." Her expression hardened. "You're going to sue me? Your own sister? Would you rather go to prison?" I asked calmly. 8 years. A state facility. Or a civil settlement. Your choice." Magnus looked at me with something resembling approval. "Your lawyer should contact my office as well." He said, "I will ensure that Chef Bastien and Andy submit complete statements detailing everything that occurred tonight. Thorne Global will fully cooperate with any legal process." "Thank you," I murmured. "Don't thank me," Magnus replied softly. "You protected yourself tonight. Preserving the evidence was a smart decision. Most people in your position would have been too overwhelmed to think clearly." "I work with delicate things," I said, finally allowing the paramedic to remove the mask. "I know how to keep them safe. We need to leave immediately," the paramedic said firmly, signaling to the driver. "She needs continuous medical supervision." As the ambulance doors began to shut, I took one final glance at my family standing on the sidewalk. They believed I had shown mercy. They believed I had chosen family over justice. They believed I was still the same quiet, agreeable sailor who always placed their needs above her own. They were mistaken. I needed time. Time to construct an unbreakable case. Time to let them lower their defenses. Time to collect every piece of proof that would make what followed impossible to dispute. Sloan assumed that working with a lawyer the next day would involve polite discussions, perhaps a minor settlement, maybe an apology that would allow everyone to move on and pretend this never happened. She had no idea what was ahead. I spent 3 days hospitalized. The anaphylaxis had caused more harm than the doctors initially realized. My vocal cords were swollen and injured, leaving my voice rough and weak. I would require weeks of speech therapy to fully heal. The repeated epinephrine injections had stressed my heart, requiring continuous cardiac monitoring. Psychologically, I was falling apart. Nightmares of suffocating, panic attacks triggered by the smell of mushrooms, a deep, instinctive fear every time I had to eat anything. But I didn't rest. I didn't spend a single moment feeling sorry for myself. On the second day, while still connected to IVs and monitors, I had my attorney, Mr. Lewis, visit me. He was a sharp, aggressive lawyer in his mid-40s who specialized in civil litigation and personal injury cases. I had hired him 3 years earlier for a contract dispute, and he had impressed me with his relentless efficiency. "Tell me everything," he said, pulling out his tablet to take notes. I told him everything. Every detail. The conversation with Magnus that triggered Sloane's jealousy. Her disappearance to speak privately with the chef. The soup that nearly killed me. The confession made in front of witnesses. "This case is airtight," Mr. Lewis said, his eyes sharp with interest. She confessed in front of an entire room, including the CEO of a major corporation. "We have testimony from the chef confirming her specific request to add crab oil. We have the server's statement confirming she directed that bowl to your seat. We have physical evidence in the form of the soup itself. And we have Magnus Thorne as a witness to your medical emergency and his immediate response. I want sworn affidavits from Chef Bastian and Andy," I said, my damaged voice barely louder than a whisper, written and notarized before my family or anyone else has a chance to pressure them. "Consider it done," Mr. Lewis replied. "I'll have them within 48 hours. And I want a complete medical report documenting every injury, the throat damage, cardiac strain, psychological trauma, all of it. Already arranged. The hospital is fully cooperating." I looked at him directly. "I want her destroyed, Mr. Lewis. Not injured. Not humiliated. Destroyed. I want her to lose everything she values, her career, her finances, her reputation. I want my parents to understand exactly what their favorite child is capable of. And I want it handled legally, cleanly, and completely." Mr. Lewis smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. It was the smile of a predator who had just identified its prey. "How much are we demanding?" $900,000, I said without hesitation. Enough to financially devastate her, but not so much that it appears unreasonable to a mediator that IT covers my medical expenses, lost income, emotional distress, and the cost of psychiatric care. And it's set just low enough that she'll feel like she's getting off lightly. "You've planned this carefully." "I've had plenty of time to think," I said. "One more thing. I want this settled through mediation, not court. Court drags on, and I want it resolved quickly, 3 weeks from tonight. Can you make that happen? For $900,000 in a clear-cut case, the defense will jump at mediation. They'll fear what a jury might award." "Good," I said, because my silence is not forgiveness. It's strategy. Mr. Lewis stood, closing his tablet. "Your sister tried to kill you, Miss Cole. She deserves everything coming her way." "She tried to diminish me," I corrected calmly. "She aimed to make me small, weak, to prove I was nothing. That's even worse than attempting to kill me, because she wanted me to survive it, to endure the humiliation." I leaned back against the hospital pillows, suddenly drained. "Instead," I continued, "she's going to learn what happens when someone underestimates a person who has spent their life working with things that are fragile yet precious. You learn how to protect them, how to repair them, and how to eliminate any threat completely, permanently, without mercy." My lawyer left with clear instructions. Over the next 2 weeks, while I recovered at home, he worked relentlessly. He gathered sworn affidavits from Chef Bastian and Andy, collected medical records and expert opinions, and built a case file that was completely damning. And my family? They believed I was healing. They thought I was processing trauma, deciding whether to forgive. My mother sent elaborate flower arrangements, which I donated immediately to the hospital. My father left rambling voicemails, urging me not to let this tear the family apart. And Sloan sent a text, "Can we talk? I think there's been a misunderstanding." I ignored all of them. My silence wasn't forgiveness. It was the calm before the storm, the pause when you hold your breath and aim carefully. Because you only get one chance. When Mr. Lewis called on day 19 to say mediation was set for day 21, exactly 3 weeks after the incident, I smiled for the first time since the poisoning. "Perfect," I whispered into the phone, my voice still hoarse but growing stronger each day. "Let's end this." It took 3 weeks for the swelling to subside, so I could speak without pain and sit upright for more than an hour without my heart racing like a trapped bird. That's also how long it took Mr. Lewis to compile every piece of evidence into a legal file so airtight, even the most expensive defense attorney would advise settling. That's how long my family waited before trying to sweep attempted murder under the rug like a wine stain on luxury carpet. The mediation room smelled of lemon polish and desperation. One of those corporate spaces designed to appear neutral. Beige walls, a long oak table, leather chairs that squeaked when you moved. The kind of room where million-dollar deals die quietly, careers end with a signature instead of a scene. I arrived early with Mr. Lewis, my hands still trembling slightly from the medication I'd be on for 6 months. Doctors said the tremors would fade. I wasn't sure I wanted them to. They reminded me of what nearly was taken from me. Sloan walked in 12 minutes late. Because, of course, she couldn't resist the power play of making everyone wait. She wore a dove-gray dress that likely cost more than my monthly rent. Her hair was pulled back into a soft chignon that practically advertised innocent victim. Her makeup was flawless, enough to look composed, not so much that it appeared cold, but it was her expression that made my stomach tighten. That carefully rehearsed look of regret, eyes open just a fraction wider than normal, lips pressed together in what was meant to signal restrained anguish. I had seen that face countless times while growing up. It was the face she used when she wanted something, when she needed someone to believe her, when she was about to lie so smoothly that even she might convince herself. Mom and Dad stood beside her like personal security. Dad's jaw was set in that familiar rigid way that meant he had already decided how this would end. Mom kept glancing at me with eyes that held something I had never noticed before, fear, maybe mixed with a frantic kind of pleading. They looked at me the way people stare at a ticking countdown. "Sailor," Mom began. Her voice slipped into that gentle, calming tone she used when I was little and had skinned my knee. "Honey, we're so glad you're feeling better." I didn't answer. Mr. Lewis had prepared me. Speak only when necessary. Let the evidence speak for itself. Don't allow them to pull at your emotions. I folded my hands on the table, feeling the cool wood under my palms, and waited. Sloan leaned forward. Right on cue, her eyes began to shine. "Sailor, her voice broke with perfect timing. Like a thin crack in porcelain. "I need you to know how sorry I am. I swear. I only thought you'd get an itchy rash or something. Maybe your throat would feel a little scratchy. I was just trying to tease you, you know? Help you relax. Get you to stop being so serious all the time." She reached across the table as if to take my hand. I pulled mine away. "I didn't know," she went on, and now the tears were real, convincing, I had to admit. "I didn't know you would almost die. If I had known, I never would have." "Stop." The word came out harsher than I intended, sharp enough that everyone flinched. My mother rushed and immediately, launching her own version of damage control. "Sailor, please. Your sister made a mistake. A horrible mistake. But she never meant for things to go this far. She didn't think it would be this bad. Can't you just let it go? Let it go." As if my sister hadn't watched me seize on the floor of a restaurant. As if she hadn't poured crab fat oil into my soup and then sat there, wine glass in hand, waiting to see what would happen. As if "I didn't think it would be this bad" was somehow a valid defense for poisoning someone. Dad cleared his throat. His voice carried that familiar paternal authority that used to make me comply without question. "Sailor, I know you're angry. And you have every right to be. But at the end of the day, no matter what happens, We're your only family. Aren't we? Family forgives. Family moves on. Something inside me broke, but not in the way they expected. I felt it in my chest. That final thread snapping clean. The obligation. The guilt. The desperate childhood hope that one day they would choose me first. It all dropped away like useless weight. My voice trembled when I spoke, but not from weakness. From anger. From grief. From the sudden, dizzy clarity of someone who had just stepped out of a burning building and could finally see the open sky. No. Sloane's carefully constructed expression faltered. No. I don't want a family like this. I looked at each of them in turn. Sloane with her polished victim act. Mom with her enabling desperation. Dad with his entitled authority. I absolutely will not let it go. The silence that followed was so profound I could hear the wall clock ticking. Carl chose that moment to open his briefcase. The snap of the lock sounded decisive, like a judge striking a gavel. "Miss Cole," he said, addressing Sloane with a clinical precision that left no room for familiarity. No nicknames, no warmth, no family softness. You are a PR director. You've built a career around optics, narrative control, and anticipating how every action is perceived. He slid a document across the table. Which means you understand the line between a prank and attempted manslaughter. Sloane went pale. "That's not. I didn't," she stammered. "We have testimony from Chef Bastien confirming that you specifically requested crab fat oil be added to your sister's soup." Carl's voice remained calm, unwavering. "We have testimony from Andy, the server, confirming you personally ensured the soup reached your sister's place. Toxicology reports confirm shellfish proteins in Miss Sailor Cole's system at levels consistent with deliberate contamination." He produced more documents. "Your text messages to Chef Bastien 3 days before the dinner, asking about ingredients that could trigger a reaction. Your internet searches. How much shellfish causes an allergic reaction? Can you hide crab oil in soup? Symptoms of severe allergic reaction." Each piece of evidence landed with weight, rippling across the room. "This was premeditated," Carl said. "That elevates it beyond reckless endangerment. The DA's office has indicated potential charges of aggravated assault with intent to cause serious harm. Given the planning, you could face 8 years in a state correctional facility." My parents' faces went pale. Sloane shook her head frantically. No, that's not. I didn't mean." Carl's tone shifted slightly, like a door cracking open. "Alternatively, my client is willing to resolve this matter civilly. We would forego criminal prosecution in exchange for full compensation for medical expenses, pain, emotional distress, and punitive damages." Dad found his voice. "How much?" Carl looked at me. I gave a small nod. $900,000. The number hung in the air, heavy and absolute. "That's insane," Sloane said, losing her composure. "I don't have that kind of money. Nobody our age does. You own a 2-bedroom apartment in Riverside Heights, valued at approximately $400,000, Carl continued, not glancing at notes. You have jewelry, a vehicle, investment accounts. Your parents have retirement funds and home equity." He leaned forward. "The alternative is prison, a criminal record, and civil liability that could last decades. This settlement includes a full release of liability and a non-disclosure agreement protecting your reputation. You retain your freedom and whatever dignity remains." Mom's hand flew to her mouth. Dad stared at the table as if the wood might reveal a solution. Sloane looked at me, truly looked, for the first time, maybe ever. I saw her understand this was no longer her baby sister. This was not the girl who'd shrink herself so Sloane could shine. This was someone who had nearly died and decided mere survival wasn't enough. I wanted restitution. I wanted consequences. Everything she'd used to hurt me would now work against her. "You can't do this," she whispered. I met her gaze steadily. "I can. I am." My parents looked at me with eyes full of something I had never seen directed at me before, fear. And underneath it, hatred. The kind reserved for someone who breaks unspoken rules, refuses to play their expected role. I looked away. Their opinions no longer mattered. Negotiations lasted 45 minutes. My father arguing the sum down, my mother crying, Sloane swinging between anger and desperation. In the end, the math was simple. $900,000 or 8 years in prison. They signed. I watched Sloane's hand shake as she wrote her signature, the same one that had once graced countless PR documents, now binding her to financial disaster. My parents signed as co-guarantors, trading their retirement security for their golden child's freedom. Once the papers were collected and full payment terms set, due in 90 days, first installment in 2 weeks, Sloane looked at me one last time. "I'm your sister," she said, voice hollow. "No," I replied, standing, gathering my coat. "You were someone who tried to kill me. That's different." I walked out of the beige room, out of the building, into afternoon sunlight that felt like absolution. Behind me, I heard my mother crying and my father calling my name angrily like a curse. I didn't look back. Before long, I learned through a former colleague who tracked industry gossip that Sloane was unemployed. The PR firm had quietly let her go, citing restructuring, but everyone knew the truth. Word spreads fast, especially about someone who once burned as brightly and as publicly as Sloane. Whispers followed her: unstable, liability, the sister poisoner. She sold the Riverside Heights apartment at a loss, pawned jewelry, returned the leased car. My parents withdrew their pension and took a second mortgage to cover the difference. The payments went through, one by one, each a piece of the life Sloane had built by diminishing others. Months later, I heard from the same colleague about an engagement party. Sloane attended in a borrowed dress, her desperation hidden behind her practiced smile. She found Richard there, old money, divorced, lonely enough to be charmed by a beautiful woman who laughed at his jokes. Classic Sloane. She always knew how to read people and become exactly what they wanted. For 2 months, she played the role perfectly. Let him wine and dine her, moved into his penthouse, posted curated social media photos. Look at me. I'm back. I'm fine. I'm better than ever. But mask slip. He caught a small lie: college, work, something minor. One lie unraveled into another until he started digging. What he discovered was the truth. Not the sanitized version Sloane had sold, but the real story. A woman who had poisoned her sister, been sued into financial ruin, and would hurt anyone to climb back to the top. He removed her coldly, efficiently. Had his assistant pack her things, left them in the lobby, changed the locks, the same way you remove any threat from your life. Last I heard, Sloane worked at a telemarketing company in a strip mall, 40 hours a week, reading scripts to people who hung up, earning $12 an hour. Sometimes I wondered if she reflected on that dinner party. If she lay awake in some cheap apartment, thinking about the night she decided hurting me was worth the risk. I hoped she did. 1 year after the night I nearly died, I stood in my library. Even after months, the words felt surreal. The building, a converted warehouse in the arts district, had exposed brick, enormous windows letting in cascading light. The air smelled of old paper and lemon oil, the perfume of preserved history. Rows of custom-built shelves lined the walls, each holding volumes in various stages of restoration. Some books were pristine, ready to be cataloged. Others were mid-restoration, their spines separated from the text blocks, pages pressed under weights, acid damage painstakingly treated with specialized solutions. This was my business, coal conservation and restoration. I had almost chosen a different last name, hoping to sever the final tie to my family. But Mr. Lewis had advised against it. "Own it," he said. "You're not the one who should feel ashamed." The settlement had been the seed. $900,000, minus legal fees, medical expenses, and therapy needed to process my sister's betrayal. What remained allowed me to lease the space, buy equipment, hire 2 junior conservators, and establish a reputation. Surviving nearly being killed had turned me into a minor legend in certain circles. The book conservator who'd been attacked, survived, and built an empire. Morbid, maybe, but I didn't mind. People remembered me. People hired me. Magnus Thorne had opened doors I never thought I'd walk through. A month after mediation, he visited my small studio apartment, a contract in hand, encompassing his entire heritage library. 400 years of Thorne family documents, first editions, personal letters. "I want you to preserve them." I'd asked why he trusted me with such a valuable collection. His answer was simple and direct. "Because you understand that some things are worth saving, and some things must be removed, like cancer. You know the difference." That single contract guaranteed $200,000 a year for the next 5 years. It established my credibility, drew in other high-net-worth clients, and allowed me to expand faster than I could have imagined. A year later, my company was valued at $2.5 million. I walked through the library, fingers tracing leather, cloth, and vellum. Each book was a miniature universe, a preserved fragment of someone's thoughts. Many arrived damaged, water stains, mold, pages eaten away by time, neglect, and acid. I repaired them carefully, methodically, with patience and precision. I reversed what could be saved and, when necessary, made the difficult choice to let go of what was beyond recovery. The work was meditative, solitary, the kind that suited someone who'd learned not all relationships could be repaired, that sometimes the healthiest choice was to seal away the toxic and create something new. In the back room, my junior conservators, Emily and David, worked on 18th century letters. Emily hummed softly, tissue paper rustled. The quiet dedication of people in love with their craft filled the room. I had built this, not with family wealth or connections, but from the compensation for nearly being murdered. Every shelf, tool, and restored page testified to transforming the worst event of my life into something beautiful. My phone buzzed. A text from Mr. Lewis, final payment cleared. Case officially closed. The third and last installment, Sloane's debt, or rather my parents' debt on Sloane's behalf, was fully paid. I stared at the message, waiting for a feeling, triumph, maybe, or closure. Instead, I felt quiet. I walked to the window, looking out at the city. Somewhere, Sloane was probably stuck in a telemarketing cubicle, reading a script, getting hung up on. My parents were likely in their mortgaged home, resenting me, insisting I'd overreacted, arguing that family should forgive. They were wrong, but it no longer mattered. Their opinions felt distant, like echoes from a country I had long left behind, irrelevant, someone else's concern. I returned to my library, to the restoration table where a 16th century manuscript awaited my focus. The pages were fragile, edges darkened with age, yet the text remained clear. Still valuable, still deserving of care. I sat down, donned my cotton gloves, and selected my tools with the precision of a surgeon. This was my work now, preserving what mattered, removing harmful elements, whether corrosive acids on paper or toxic ties in family. I carefully opened the manuscript, examining the damage and planning the restoration. Outside, the afternoon sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating dust particles that floated like golden snow. My life was complete now, bright, rebuilt from the remnants of the career of the sister who once tried to destroy me. And for the first time in 26 years, I was exactly where I was meant to be.